So the White House has confirmed that an Iranian proposal to end the war is under discussion. Caroline Levitt says while it's being considered, Washington's red lines remain in place.
I will confirm the president has met with his national security team this morning. The meeting may be ongoing, maybe not. I don't want to speak affirmatively because I was prepping to come out here. But the proposal was being discussed. I don't want to get ahead of the president or his national security team. What I will reiterate is that the president's red lines with respect to Iran have been made very, very clear, not just to the American public, but also to them as well.
Meanwhile, Iran's top diplomat says Tehran is considering a request from Washington for talks. Abbas Araghchi made the comments on social media after he met Russian President Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg. He said negotiations have stalled because of what he called Washington's destructive habits, unreasonable demands and frequent changes in position. During the meeting, Putin pledged his support to ensure peace returns to the Middle East.
They have achieved none of their goals. This is why we ask for negotiation. We are now considering.
Well, Amigdad Al-Ruhaydis is live for us in Tehran. But first, let's speak to Mike Hanna, who's at the White House. And Mike, so Donald Trump met with his national security team. Any word yet on what's been discussed?
No, there was no formal readout about the exact details of that meeting, which lasted from mid-morning until well into the afternoon before King Charles arrived here on his visit. But it was the senior members of President Trump's intelligence team, including obviously the Secretary of State, the director of the CIA, and those involved in the negotiations. Vice President Vance was there. And these discussions lasted a number of hours, but we haven't got the full detail yet. We don't know whether there were specific discussions being held about specific points of what is said to be an Iranian proposal, or whether the wider aspect of this was discussed. The one thing that we do know is, because it's been stated repeatedly, is that it's up to President Trump and President Trump alone to decide whether the ceasefire remains extended for further negotiations or whether it's all called off and he goes back into conflict. But the discussions happened, still no news as to exactly what was discussed at the White House during those few hours.
All right, well, from the White House, let's head to Tehran. Al-Migdad Al-Ruhayd is live for us right there. And Iran's foreign minister has posted that they're looking into this request from Donald Trump for negotiations. What more have you heard about this?
Well, this is an important shift in tone, actually, after this, what we would describe as a shuttle diplomacy by the top officials, especially Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister of Iran, roving between the capitals and the regional partnership and the partners and regional mediators, is starting from Islamabad to Oman and then to Moscow this the past few hours. So what do we know that the new proposal, the new offer, as described by the United States, here in Iranian media described and framed differently. They described as a red lines for Iranians. You know that the main obstacles and the consequences of this war is the naval blockade over the Iranian ports and also the choke points, one of the most strategic choke points in the world, Strait of Hormuz, is the consequences of war. Now the Iranians and the Iranian officials have been saying that we are dealing and differentiate these obstacles and this new deadlock in different tracks. Let's deal first with the consequences of war. Let's speak about the sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. Let's speak about the safety and safe transit for ships in the Strait of Hormuz. And then we will speak about the nuclear file later. So this is what expected that Abbas Araghchi and his team mediating and also conveying to his partnership, especially through Pakistan and Oman, and now he's looking for most strategic partnership with Vladimir Putin in Moscow.
Al-Migdad Al-Ruhayd there in Tehran. Thanks for that. OK, let's try and bring this all together for more analysis and joined in the studio here by Mark Kemmett, who's a retired US general, former retired US General and former Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs. And I was actually reading the introduction to Harry Ensche here, who joins us from San Diego, who's a former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and former US Ambassador. And Ambassador, I'd like to start with you, if I may. So this Iran proposal reopens the Strait, but it pushes the nuclear deal down the road. Is it plausible, do you think, to decouple the maritime crisis from the nuclear issue?
I don't think decouple completely is likely. I think some sort of sequencing is likely. The Iranians have already, in a way, achieved a strategic success because now they have the United States discussing the nature of Iran's role in coordinating or controlling or administering the Strait, whereas on February 27th, it was simply recognized as an international waterway with free passage through it from one body of water to another. And now we're going to talk about an Iranian role of some sort. So if the Iranians are smart, they'll take that, sequence it into a nuclear deal, and achieve a strategic success that wouldn't have been possible a couple months ago. But who knows? The Iranians have a negotiating style, and they will delay, and they will tend to overreach.
General Comment, do you agree with that? Do you think it's feasible? Do you think the top US officials who've been studying this evening and daytime in the US, are they likely to buy it?
No, I really don't think so. Although I hope Mike was just condensing his comments, Mike Hanna, because when he mentioned the national security grouping, he talked about the intelligence, he talked about the State Department, he talked about the National Security Advisor. Noticeably absent, and perhaps just an oversight, there was no mention of the defense team, no mention of the Minister of Defense, no mention of the Chairman of Joint Staff, the CENTCOM commander is typically on a VTC, but it would really be an interesting tell if they had not been at that meeting, because that would tell me they're talking more simply about diplomacy than they are about military action.
And if they are at that meeting, what difference does that make then in your view?
Oh, I think that the military would be talking about the Strait of Hormuz, giving options for military actions, giving options for those ground troops. I think the president would want to hear, I know that the president would want to hear all options to respond to this offer on the part of the Iranians. Should we softball it and say, let's talk about it, but we need to hear something on the timeline? Or is he going to hardball it? I can imagine Secretary Hegseth saying, no, sir, we got to go in and we can't allow them to decouple the Strait of Hormuz from our core objectives. And I've got the military to do it. So those take on a very interesting...
Yeah, that is interesting. Ambassador, you could easily argue that it does demonstrate Iranian weakness in the face of the US blockade, which is choking off the Iranian economy, and they're desperate to get a move on and to get rid of that blockade.
So I think that's right. Obviously, everything for the Iranian regime comes close to being existential, right? And also, we don't know how much pressure they can actually take as they try to stay in existence. Look, for us, it's damage to the American economy. It's a political problem for the president. But how much pressure will the Iranians be able to withstand is a question. Look, these kinds of regimes tend to fall when they can no longer support or pay their security forces. They've amply demonstrated they're willing to use those security forces against their own people. But if they start to feel like they can't pay their security forces, that would be the ultimate source of pressure, pushing them toward a more acceptable deal, or at least a more acceptable framework in which to discuss a deal for the Americans. I haven't seen much evidence that we're quite there yet.
All right.
So hence the nature of the Iranian proposal.
You want to come in there?
Well, I'd simply say Henry's exactly right. All we've got to do is look at Cuba, which has been under sanctions since 1961, Venezuela, which had sort of the same structure. These types of dictatorships are remarkably resilient over time. But the one thing that Henry said that I very much agree with is that the key node are the security forces. It's when the security forces break down in those countries that the people have a chance to take over. But as long as the security forces, and in this case, the Basij and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, as long as they are loyal to the regime and are willing to crack heads to keep the regime in place, it's going to be like Cuba.
Ambassador, do you think, is it your view that the IRGC and the political leadership in Iran, we're seeing a lot of the foreign minister at the moment, we're not hearing directly from the IRGC. Do you think they are in union, or are there different directions here?
Yeah, I don't think there's unity here. I will say, and could happily cite some historical cases. These joint leadership councils, they never work. Sooner or later, one person rises to the top, and I would cite Egypt, I would cite Iraq. So who knows what kind of a struggle for power is going on right now inside of Iran. It does seem pretty apparent to me that that struggle is occurring almost entirely within different factions of the IRGC itself, with all of them trying to suggest that they are the ones who are doing the will of the supreme leader. Who knows where the supreme leader is or exactly how much he's playing on all of this. But to me, this looks like an intra within the IRGC struggle for power. And that by itself might push toward a deal so that they could then settle their own internal problems.
Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Henry Enscher, former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and former U.S. Ambassador, and General Mark Emmett here in the studio. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.